Sometimes when we face trials and tribulations, it can feel as though the weight of the world is on our shoulders. Life has a way of throwing challenges that seem insurmountable, obstacles that appear impossible to overcome. But in those moments, remember this truth: God will make a way for you. When you look at your situation, it may seem bleak. You might wonder, how will I ever get through this? You may feel as though there is no way out, that the doors are closed and the path is too difficult. But God, in His infinite wisdom and power, does not work according to human logic. He sees beyond the present circumstances. He knows the way when we cannot see it. He opens doors that no man can shut and makes a way where there seems to be no way. The Bible tells us that God's ways are higher than ours. His thoughts are deeper. He does not work in the way that we expect, but He is faithful. There are countless stories in Scripture of people who, in the face of impossibilities, trusted in God's ability to make a way. Think about Moses standing at the edge of the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army closing in. It looked like the end, but God parted the waters and His people walked through on dry land. Think about David, a young shepherd boy facing a giant, Goliath, with nothing but a slingshot. The odds were stacked against him, but God gave him victory, not by strength, but by His power. You might not see it today, but God is already at work in your life. His timing is perfect and His power is greater than anything you can imagine. Sometimes He needs to work in you before He works for you. There may be lessons to be learned, strengths to be built, and faith to be tested. But know that in the midst of it all, God is setting the stage for your breakthrough. He's preparing the way even when you don't see it. Trust Him in the waiting, for He is faithful. Do not focus on the obstacle. Focus on the one who can move mountains. The enemy may try to tell you that your situation is hopeless, but God has a plan for you, and it is good. His purpose will not fail. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. When you put your trust in Him, He will make a way, even when there seems to be no way. There is no situation too difficult for God, no problem too big, no burden too heavy. He is the God who specializes in miracles. The very thing that looks impossible to you is an opportunity for God to show His glory in your life. So stand firm in your faith. Hold on to His promises. God will make a way for you. In the journey of life, it's easy to become overwhelmed when you're faced with challenges that seem insurmountable. The mountains in front of you may appear too tall to climb, the valleys too deep to cross, and the storms too fierce to endure. In these moments of difficulty, it is vital to remember one of the most powerful truths of our faith: God will make a way for you. It may not always happen in the way you expect, but it will happen in the way that He knows is best for you. When you encounter trials, it's natural to feel discouraged. You may ask yourself, why is this happening to me? Or how am I ever going to make it through this life? Can sometimes feel like a series of battles, one after another, without a break in sight. Yet, in those moments of despair, God's promise to you remains unwavering. He has already made a way, and all He asks is for you to trust Him. In times of uncertainty, God is our anchor, and He is our provider. He will never leave you or forsake you. His word says that He is a very present help in times of trouble, not distant or absent, but right there in the middle of your storm. If we look closely, we'll find that God often works in ways that are unexpected. His path is not always the one we would choose for ourselves, but His way is always the best way. Sometimes God leads us through difficulty, not because He wants to see us suffer, but because He knows that it is through those struggles that we grow, that our faith is strengthened, and that we learn to depend on Him fully. The Bible tells us that without faith, it is impossible to please God. And faith is often developed in the crucible of hardship. when everything around you seems to be falling apart, is the perfect time for God to show up and show you just how powerful He is. There are many examples in the Bible of people who found themselves in situations that seemed hopeless, only to see God make a way when there appeared to be no way. One of the most famous examples is the story of the Israelites escaping from Egypt. They had been slaves for over 400 years, oppressed and beaten down by the Egyptians. When God finally delivered them, they found themselves at the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army closing in behind them. The people were terrified. They thought they were trapped. But God, in His mercy and power, parted the waters, and the Israelites walked through on dry ground to safety. What looked like an impossible situation was no match for the power of God. There are times when you may feel as though you've reached your limit. You may have tried everything you know to fix your situation and nothing seems to work. But in those moments, remember that God specializes in the impossible. When you reach the end of your ability, that's when God's ability takes over. It is in your weakness that His strength is made perfect. God's power is not limited by the things that limit us. He is the creator of all things, and nothing is too difficult for Him. If He can part the Red Sea, He can certainly make a way for you. Another example from Scripture is the story of Abraham. God promised Abraham that he would be the father of many nations. But for years, he and his wife Sarah had no children. They were both well advanced in age, and it seemed impossible that they could have a child. But God's promise was sure. And in His perfect timing, He fulfilled that promise. When Abraham and Sarah had given up hope, God made a way. Isaac, the promised son, was born when it seemed like it was too late. God had a plan all along. Even when Abraham and Sarah couldn't see it. God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our own expectations. This is the same God who is at work in your life today. Whatever it is that you are facing, God knows your situation. He knows your heart, your fears, your desires, and your struggles. And He is working behind the scenes to bring about His good plan for your life. It may not always look like what you expect, but rest assured that His way is better than anything you could have imagined. God's plan is always good, and He will not leave you in the wilderness. He will not leave you stranded. He will make a way for you, even in the midst of your challenges. But sometimes the hardest part is waiting. Waiting for God to move can feel like a test of your faith. The enemy wants to sow seeds of doubt in your mind to convince you that God has forgotten you, or that your situation is too difficult for Him to handle. But don't listen to those lies. God is not a man that He should lie. His word is true, and He is faithful to fulfill every promise He has made to you. You may not see the way right now, but trust that it is coming. God is never late, and He is always on time. His timing is perfect. In the waiting, God is working in you. He is building your character, strengthening your faith, and preparing you for the blessings that are ahead. The Bible says that we are to count it all joy when we face trials, knowing that the testing of our faith produces patience. Patience is not something we often desire, but it is something that is necessary for growth. In the waiting, God is shaping you into the person you are meant to be. He is teaching you to trust Him fully, to rely on Him alone, and to be content in every circumstance. You may not understand why you are facing the challenges you're facing, but trust that God is using them for your good. He is refining you, purifying you, and preparing you for the next season of your life. When God makes a way for you, it will not only be for your benefit, but for His glory. He will use your testimony to encourage others and to show them that He is faithful. The breakthrough you are waiting for will not just change your life, it will also change the lives of those around you. Your victory will be a testimony to the goodness of God and a reminder that He is always at work, even when we don't see it. There are times when the path ahead seems unclear, and the road is filled with obstacles, but remember that God is not limited by what you can see. He is not bound by the laws of nature, nor is he constrained by your circumstances. When God decides to make a way, he moves mountains, parts seas, and opens doors that no man can shut. Your job is to trust him and take the steps he leads you to take, knowing that he is guiding you every step of the way. Do not be afraid of the unknown. Do not be afraid of what lies ahead. God's word promises that he has plans for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. His plans are always good, and he will make a way for you. Even when things seem impossible, he is working things out for your good. Hold on to his promises and know that he will never leave you, never forsake you, and never fail you. Whatever it is that you are facing today, remember that you are not alone. God is with you. He will make a way for you. When the way seems impossible, God will provide. When the door is closed, he will open it. When the road is blocked, he will clear the path. Trust in him, lean on him, and believe that he is at work in your life. God will make a way for you, and his way is always the best way. Trust in him, and know that your breakthrough is on the way. In life, you will encounter moments when the challenges seem to come one after another, when the burden feels too heavy to carry and the way forward feels obscured by darkness. It is during these moments that the truth must echo in your spirit. God will make a way for you. In your weakest moments, when your heart is overwhelmed, he will be the lifter of your head, the one who leads you through the storm, the one who shines his light on the path before you. You are never without hope, because God's power is greater than any obstacle you will face. When we find ourselves in situations where we cannot see the way out, it's easy to lose hope. The enemy seeks to cloud our vision and distract us from the truth that God has already gone before us, preparing the way. He works in ways that we do not always understand, but his ways are always for our good. God's path is not always the one we would choose for ourselves, but it is the best path. His timing is perfect, his purpose is unshakable, and his plans for you are good. Even when you cannot see what he is doing, he is at work on your behalf. Sometimes the hardest part is not the waiting, but the trusting. Trusting that God will show up, that he will do what he has promised. The enemy loves to plant seeds of doubt in our minds to make us question God's ability or his desire to help us. But we must remember that God is a God of his word. His promises are sure, and he will never break them. He has said that he will make a way for you, and he will. Even when you cannot see the path ahead, trust that he is already working in ways you cannot understand. He is preparing the way, even when it seems like nothing is happening. Sometimes God asks us to walk in faith without seeing the full picture. He calls us to step out even when the ground beneath us seems uncertain. But that is where faith grows, when we trust in God, even in the unknown. When you walk by faith, you walk in the certainty that God will meet your needs, that he will provide, and that he will show you the way. Even when it seems like the walls are closing in, trust that God is opening doors for you. He is making a way where there seems to be no way. God's ways are not like our ways. He doesn't think the way we think or act the way we would act. When we feel that all hope is lost, God is already working on our behalf. He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating events, opening doors, and creating opportunities for us that we may never have imagined. Trust in God's perfect plan. Trust that he sees what you cannot see, that he knows what you do not know, and that he is moving in ways you cannot comprehend. God will make a way for you, even in the darkest of times. In moments of difficulty, remember that God has already promised to be with you. He is your shepherd, guiding you through the darkest valleys, and he will never leave you. His provision is constant, his strength is sufficient, and his love never fails. The difficulties you face today are not the end of your story. They are part of the process that God is using to shape you, to strengthen your faith, and to prepare you for the blessings He has in store for you. You may not understand why things are happening the way they are, but trust that God is in control. He is making a way for you. When you are weak, He is strong. When you feel like giving up, He will give you the strength to press on. And when you reach the end of your own ability, that's when God will step in and make a way for you. Keep trusting, keep believing, and keep moving forward, because your breakthrough is on the way. God will make a way, and He will get the glory. The key to overcoming the obstacles you face is not in your own strength, but in your trust in the one who is greater than any challenge you will ever face. Hold fast His promises. Keep your eyes on Him. He will make a way for you, and His way is always the best way. Let that truth comfort you today, knowing that no matter what you're going through, God is with you, and He will make a way. In life, there are times when it seems as though the road ahead is filled with obstacles, and every step you take brings you closer to a dead end. These moments can make you feel isolated, unsure, and desperate for a way out. But I want to remind you today that even in the most trying of times, God will make a way for you. No matter how impossible your situation seems, God is able to open doors that no man can shut. His power is limitless, and His love for you is unwavering. When faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges, it's easy to focus on the problems at hand and lose sight of the bigger picture. The weight of life's burdens can cloud our minds, making us question whether there is any hope left. But in these moments, we must remember that God has already made a way. The promise that God will provide a path forward is not just a hopeful wish, it is a guarantee grounded in His faithfulness. God is not bound by the limitations of time, space, or our circumstances. When He promises to make a way, He does so in ways that often surpass our understanding. He doesn't need a map or a plan, because He already knows the end from the beginning. He sees beyond the obstacles we encounter and understands the purpose behind each season of our lives. Whether we are in a time of testing, waiting, or uncertainty, God is never inactive. Even when we can't see it, He is working, orchestrating events and circumstances to lead us to the place He has prepared for us. The journey of faith often requires patience. It's not always easy to wait, especially when we feel like the answer to our prayers should come sooner. But God's timing is perfect. He doesn't operate on the same timetable that we do. His delays are not denials, and His silence is not abandonment. In fact, God's timing allows Him to work things out in the best possible way. There may be things happening behind the scenes that we are not aware of, but we can trust that God is using every moment to shape us, prepare us, and guide us toward His divine purpose. In those moments of waiting, we have a choice. We can either choose to worry, allowing doubt and fear to consume our hearts, or we can choose to trust in God's sovereignty, knowing that He will make a way in His time. Worry only serves to block the flow of faith and peace that God desires to give us. When we place our trust in God, we open ourselves to the possibility of seeing His miracles unfold in our lives. Trusting God means letting go of our need to control everything and surrendering to His plan, even when we don't fully understand it. One of the key aspects of walking in faith is the understanding that God's way may not always look like the one we had planned. We often imagine how things should unfold in our lives, but God has a much greater plan. His path is not always straight or easy, but it is always the best path. Sometimes the way forward may require us to take steps we didn't anticipate, to step into unfamiliar territory, or to face challenges we never expected. But in every situation, God is working for our good. The Bible is full of stories of men and women who, in the midst of their challenges, trusted in God's ability to make a way. Think of Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel found himself in a situation where his very life was at stake. The king had issued a decree that anyone who prayed to any god other than him would be thrown into the lion's den. Daniel, a man of great faith, refused to bow to the king's decree. His commitment to God led him to the brink of death, but it was in that moment that God showed up in a mighty way. God shut the mouths of the lions, and Daniel emerged from the den unharmed. What seemed like a certain end was actually the beginning of a powerful demonstration of God's power. God made a way when there was no way. Another example is the story of the woman with the issue of blood. For 12 long years, she had suffered from a condition that no doctor could cure. She had spent all her money and had been in constant pain. But when she heard that Jesus was passing by, she knew that he was the only one who could make a way for her. Despite the crowd, she pushed through and touched the hem of his garment. Immediately she was healed. Jesus turned to her and said, "Your faith has made you whole." In the midst of her desperation, when all other options had failed, God made a way for her. What seemed like an impossible situation was the very opportunity for God to show his miraculous power. We can take comfort in these stories, knowing that the same God who made a way for Daniel and the woman with the issue of blood is the same God who is working in our lives today. His power is unchanging, his faithfulness is eternal, and his love is unwavering. When you are faced with challenges, when you are uncertain of the way forward, remember that God will make a way. He is never too late, and he is always on time. Even when the path seems unclear, he is leading you step by step. Sometimes we need to be reminded that God's way is not just about solving our problems, but about shaping our character and faith. Trials and difficulties are often the soil in which our faith grows. They test our trust in God, our patience, and our perseverance. When things are going well, it can be easy to forget the depth of our need for God. But in times of struggle, we are reminded of our dependence on him. It is in the struggle that we are refined, strengthened, and then made more like Christ. There may be times when you feel as though you have reached the end of your rope, when you feel like giving up. But in those moments, God is inviting you to lean on him. He is calling you to trust him in ways that you never have before. It is in our weakness that his strength is made perfect. When we are at the end of ourselves, that's when God can do his greatest work. He does not need us to be strong. He just needs us to be willing to trust him. The road ahead may not always be easy, but it is always worth it. With God leading the way, there is nothing that can stop you. Keep your eyes fixed on him and trust that he will make a way. His faithfulness never fails, and his love for you is unshakable. No matter what you are facing, no matter how difficult the journey may seem, God will make a way for you. Hold fast to his promises and know that he will never let you go. Think of the times in Scripture when God made a way for his people in the most unexpected and miraculous ways. Consider the story of the Israelites as they stood at the edge of the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army closing in behind them. The sea before them was impassable, and they had no way to escape. It seemed like certain destruction. But God, in his infinite wisdom and power, told Moses to stretch out his hand, and the waters of the Red Sea parted. The Israelites walked through on dry ground. And when Pharaoh's army tried to follow, the waters came crashing down, destroying their enemies. God made a way where there seemed to be no way. In another instance, when the Israelites were wandering in the desert, they faced a time of great need. They were thirsty and there was no water in sight. But God, in his mercy, commanded Moses to strike a rock. And from that rock, water poured out to quench their thirst. In the midst of their wilderness, God provided a miraculous solution to their problem. He made a way where there was no way. The Israelites were learning a vital lesson. God is always faithful to provide for his people, even in the most unlikely circumstances. These stories are not just ancient accounts from the past, they are testimonies of God's character, and they remind us that He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Just as He made a way for the Israelites, He will make a way for you. There is no situation too big for God, no problem too complex, and no challenge too great. He sees your struggle, He understands your pain, and He is committed to making a way for you. His ways are higher than our ways, and His timing is perfect. In our society, we are often taught to rely on our own abilities, to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and solve our problems through hard work and determination. While hard work and perseverance are valuable, there are times when we reach the limits of our own strength and understanding. It is in those moments that God is waiting for us to turn to Him. He is not asking us to figure everything out on our own. He is inviting us to trust Him and lean on His infinite wisdom and power. When we are weak, He is strong. When we don't know where to turn, He will guide us. He is the way maker, and He will lead us to where we need to go. There is a profound peace that comes when we fully surrender our circumstances to God. When we let go of our own plans and trust in His, we open ourselves up to the possibilities of what He can do. His ways may not always make sense to us, but they are always for our good. Sometimes the obstacles we face are opportunities for God to demonstrate His power and faithfulness. What looks like a setback may actually be a setup for a miracle. Consider the story of Esther, a woman who was taken from her home and brought into a foreign palace. She faced the impossible task of saving her people from certain destruction. She had no control over her circumstances, and yet God used her in a powerful way to deliver the Israelites. He opened doors that no one could shut and placed her in a position of influence when it seemed impossible. God made a way for Esther, and He will make a way for you as well. Even in the most unlikely situations, God is at work behind the scenes preparing you for a breakthrough. There will be times when God's way seems unclear, and you will be tempted to take matters into your own hands. But remember, God's timing is perfect. When you trust in His process and remain faithful to His calling, He will reveal the way in due season. Sometimes the waiting is as important as the outcome, because it builds our character and strengthens our faith. We learn to rely on God and trust His plan rather than rushing ahead with our own. It's important to keep our eyes focused on God, especially when the circumstances around us are loud and distracting. The world will try to convince us that there is no way forward, that we are stuck in our situation, and that there is no hope. But we must choose to believe that God is working even when we can't see it. The Bible reminds us that we walk by faith, not by sight. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. When we trust in God, we are not bound by the limitations of what we can see with our natural eyes. We are empowered by the infinite possibilities of what God can do. When you find yourself in a difficult situation, take a moment to remember the promises of God. He is the same God who made a way for the Israelites, who parted the sea and brought water from a rock. He is the same God who provided for His people in the wilderness and who restored them in times of exile. He is the same God who sent His Son to die for you and who raised Him from the dead. That same power is at work in your life today. No situation is too difficult for God. He will make a way for you. When you face an obstacle, do not be discouraged. Trust that God has already prepared a way through it. Your current situation is not the final chapter of your story. God has a plan for you, and He is working all things together for your good. You may not understand the details now, but trust that God is moving in ways you cannot see. His plans are always good, and He will lead you to the place He has prepared for you. As you continue on your journey, keep your faith anchored in the truth that God is a way maker. He will not leave you in your struggles, but He will lead you to victory. Trust in His timing, rely on His wisdom, and hold fast to His promises. No matter what you face, Know that God is with you and He will make a way for you. The journey of life is often filled with twists and turns, mountains and valleys and moments of uncertainty. It's easy to feel lost when you find yourself in the middle of a trial or when the road ahead seems clouded with darkness. Yet in those moments of struggle, there is one unwavering truth that we must cling to. God will make a way for you. His plans for your life are bigger than the struggles you face, and His ways are higher than the obstacles you encounter. His ability to provide for you is beyond comprehension, and His love for you knows no bounds. When faced with difficulties, the natural response is often to focus on the problem, to look at the obstacles standing in our way, and to believe that there is no way through. But God has promised time and time again in His Word that He is the way maker, the one who opens doors and creates paths in places where there appear to be none. He has a way of turning what seems impossible into something miraculous. He is not limited by our circumstances, and He is never surprised by the challenges we face. He is the creator of all things, and He knows how to make a way even when we don't see one. At times we may feel as though we are stuck in a dead-end situation. Our hearts might be filled with doubt, and we might question whether there is any hope left. But the truth is that with God, there is always hope. There is always a way forward, even when we can't see it. When we feel as though we are surrounded by impossibilities, we must remind ourselves of who God is and what He is capable of. His power is limitless, and His love is greater than any challenge we may face. We see this truth throughout the Bible, where time and time again, God made a way for His people in situations that seemed impossible. When the Israelites found themselves trapped between the Red Sea and the Egyptian army with no way of escape, God parted the waters and made a way where there seemed to be no way. They walked through on dry ground, and when their enemies tried to follow, the waters came crashing down, delivering the Israelites from certain destruction. What seemed like an impossible situation was actually an opportunity for God to show His glory and power. God made a way when there was no way, and He will do the same for you. There are countless other examples in Scripture of God making a way for His people. When the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness, they encountered a bitter stream of water, and the people cried out in desperation. But God instructed Moses to throw a piece of wood into the water, and it became sweet and drinkable. God made a way for His people in the midst of their wilderness. Similarly, when the Israelites faced a shortage of food, God provided them with manna from heaven. Time and again, God proved that He is the ultimate provider, making a way when His people had nowhere else to turn. These stories are not just historical accounts, they are reminders of the character of God. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who made bitter water sweet, and who provided food for the Israelites in the desert is the same God who is with you today. He has not changed, and He will not change. What may seem impossible in your life is simply an opportunity for God to show His power. Trust that He is at work, even when you don't understand how. He is never late, and He will always provide a way when the time is right. It's important to remember that God's way may not always look like the way we expect. We often have our own ideas of how things should go, and we may try to force things to happen according to our plan. But God's plan is always better. His timing is perfect, and He knows the best route to take. His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. When you are in the midst of a trial, you may not always see the path ahead, but God sees the big picture. He knows what is best for you, and He will guide you every step of the way. Trusting in God's ability to make a way requires faith that He knows what He is doing, even when we don't understand. It requires surrendering our own plans and trusting that His will for our lives is good. There are moments when we may feel uncertain and the way forward seems unclear. But in those moments, we must remember that God has not forgotten us. He is always present, always working, and always making a way where there seems to be none. One of the keys to experiencing God's provision is learning to trust in His timing. We live in a world that values instant gratification. We want things to happen quickly, and when they don't, we can become discouraged. But God's timing is perfect. Sometimes the wait is necessary for us to grow in character, to build our faith, and to prepare for what He has in store. During those times of waiting, we are being shaped and refined. God is not just preparing the way for us, He is preparing us for the way. Think of the story of David. David was anointed to be king, but he did not immediately step into that role. Instead, he spent years in the wilderness, running from King Saul, who sought to kill him. It must have been a frustrating time for David. He had received the promise of being king, yet he was living in hiding, facing constant danger. But through that time, God was refining David's heart and preparing him for the leadership He had called him to. When the time was right, God made a way for David to become king. In the same way, when we are in seasons of waiting, God is working in us. He is preparing us for the next step, and He is building our faith. While we wait, we can trust that God is not idle. He is at work, both in our circumstances and in our hearts. When the time is right, He will open the doors that no man can shut. We must also remember that God is able to make a way even when there seems to be no natural solution. We often limit God by what we can see with our physical eyes. We may look at our circumstances and think that there is no possible way out, but God operates in a different realm. He is not confined by the limitations of this world. What is impossible for man is possible for God. When we are in situations where there is no obvious solution, we can trust that God is not limited by what we see. He has the power to make a way where none exists. This is evident in the story of the woman with the issue of blood. She had suffered for 12 years, going from doctor to doctor, spending all her money and finding no cure. But when she heard that Jesus was passing by, she knew that He was her only hope. Despite the crowd, she pushed through and touched the hem of His garment. Immediately she was healed. In that moment, God made a way for her. What seemed like a hopeless situation became the perfect opportunity for God to display His power and mercy. When we find ourselves in difficult situations, we must have the faith to believe that God can make a way for us, even when we see no way out. He is the same God who healed the woman with the issue of blood, the same God who parted the Red Sea, the same God who provides for His people in every season. In your life, no matter how impossible the situation may seem, you must hold on to the truth that God will make a way for you. He has promised to be with you, to guide you, and to provide for you every step of the way. There is no obstacle too big, no mountain too high, and no challenge too great that God cannot overcome. His love for you is constant, and His power is limitless. As you face the challenges in your life, keep your eyes on God. Trust in His timing, His plan, and His ability to make a way where there seems to be no way. His faithfulness never fails, and His love for you is unshakable. No matter what you are going through, remember that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating everything to bring about His perfect will in your life. Hold fast to the truth that He will make a way for you. As we come to the close of this message, I want to leave you with a powerful truth. No matter how impossible your situation may seem, God will make a way for you. His power is not limited by the circumstances you face, and His plans are greater than anything you could ever imagine. When the road ahead seems blocked, when you feel like you've reached the end of your strength, trust in the one who is always at work behind the scenes. He has a way out, a way through, and a way forward, even when you can't see it. Remember, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The same God who parted the Red Sea for the Israelites, who provided manna in the wilderness, and who raised Jesus from the dead is the same God who is with you today. His love for you is unchanging, and His promises are sure. He is a God of miracles, and He will make a way where there seems to be no way. So no matter where you find yourself today, hold on to this truth: God will make a way for you. Keep your faith anchored in His unshakable promises. Trust in His perfect timing, and know that He is always working on your behalf. The road may seem rough, but He will walk with you every step of the way. And when the time is right, He will open doors that no man can shut and lead you to the place of victory He has prepared for you. Keep believing, keep trusting, and never forget God will make a way for you.